What is up, my good friends? I am back. Yes, it has been a full week since I've uploaded a video, and that's just because of school. Being a high school teacher is incredible, and I love it. So, I'm here today to share with you 10 short books that I love. And if you've been watching my channel, you know that I avoided short books for a very long time because I kind of thought they were just a waste of time because I didn't really have them for that long, and it is, I don't know, I just really enjoy getting lost in a massive tome and feeling like I accomplished something at the end of a read. And because short books don't contain a whole lot of information, I felt like I didn't learn anything from them, but that has changed, and it is a whole new world in 2021 because this one right here has read a bunch of short books. So here are 10 of my favorite books that are all under 60,000 words. Number one. Oh, and this is in no particular order, by the way. Number one is The Pearl by John Steinbeck. This book, this novella, it's like 90 pages. I think it's like 18,000 words, maybe. I don't know. I'd have to double check. It's really overshadowed by Of Mice and Men. And I actually think this one's better. So this is about a Mexican Indian who is a diver who dives for pearls, and that's how he makes his money for his wife and his baby son. And one day he finds the biggest pearl of all time. They call it the Pearl of the World. And his entire world just goes to shit afterwards. And it's really brilliant. The character is actually quite likable despite the fact that he doesn't make the best decisions. And the world that Steinbeck was able to build in these short 90 pages, outstanding. And I highly recommend you read this one before you read Of Mice and Men, just so you don't have Of Mice and Men in your head while reading this other novella from probably the second best American author of all time. I'm going to say Larry McMurtry is the best. Definitely the best American writer. Best American author? Mm, author, it's a toss-up between Poe and Steinbeck. So, there we go. Number two is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And yes, I do say Gawain. Some people say Gawain, but I say Gawain. This is an old, old medieval story that's originally told in Bob and Wheel rhyme. I recommend you read the one that doesn't rhyme because for me it was just easier. For me it was just easier to comprehend. It's about a knight named Gawain at King Arthur's court who this green knight comes in. Gawain chops off his head. The knight picks up his head, rides off, and says, Gawain, you will see me in a year for another duel. And it's so silly, and it's probably the first true fantasy novel ever written. Number three. This is Free Will by Sam Harris. And I think this is a really good introduction to Harris's writing style and his voice. He wrote The End of Faith and a couple other kind of atheist-centric story, not novels, books. But this one, Free Will, it's only like 70 something, yeah, 78 pages. And it explores the idea of whether human beings truly do have free will. Now that sounds strange, but think about it. Why do we do things? Really, if you put it in your head, humans only do things for two reasons. Because we're forced to, or because we want to. So think of the most disgusting food you've ever eaten. Could you want that? Now, you're not going to go get it because you don't want it. Can you control your wants? So if we look at the reasons people do things because we're forced to or because we want to, well, we can't control things that we're forced to do. And if we can't control our wants either, do we really have free will? And that's what this explores. Another by Sam Harris is Letter to a Christian Nation. This one is really good. I love it. It was a response because he got a bunch of like really mean letters from Christians after he wrote his End of Faith book. And while I love this and I love the arguments he makes in it, these arguments really aren't going to make sense to Christians. So I think it was just a fun read. But the Christian right, just the arguments he makes, such as God being the most prolific abortionist and hypocrisy, it's like it's not going to click in a Christian's head. So if you're wanting to read this so you can argue with Christians, it's pointless. But if you just want a fun little short book, go with this. But I do recommend Sam Harris. Start with this because this is really enjoyable and really thought-provoking. Next, At Night, All Blood is Black by David Diop. This just won the International Booker Prize, and for good reason. So this is about a Senegalese warrior who is fighting for France during World War One, and he witnessed his friend's death, and his friend, for hours and hours and hours while he was slowly dying, was begging our main character to kill him. Main character couldn't do it. So afterwards, he is traumatized from that event, and everybody he kills, he starts cutting the hands off of and keeping as a souvenir. And that's why the hands are on the cover page. So this is a really good explanation of when you take somebody out of their culture, force them to fight a war that has nothing to do with them, and just what wars do to 20-year-old kids. Next, Codename Villanelle. Now, we're not talking about Villanelle poems like Rage, Rage Against the Dying of the Light. No, we're not talking about that. Codename Villanelle is actually the inspiration for the TV series, my favorite TV series, Killing Eve. And so the character Villanelle, played by Jodie Comer, was inspired by this novel. Now, this isn't so much of a novel, it's just kind of a bind-up of, I believe, 4 internet novellas that the producer came across and just really liked and thought it was awesome. It's about a government assassin named Villanelle who gets obsessed with this woman named Eve, and it's very gory and Machiavellian, and you'll see a lot of it in the first season of Killing Eve, but other than that, it really doesn't have a whole lot to do with the show. The show definitely strayed. Okay. The Time Machine. Classic, classic, classic. I don't normally like sci-fi, and I was just blown away by this story. This little novella, and short spoiler, it has an ambiguous ending, which I'm always trashed for. And if you don't know the story of the Time Machine, like, what planet are you from? But it's this time traveler. He invents a time machine, goes back in time, and it's actually an unnamed narrator in the novel, and the amazing adaptation, which is brilliant. It's a classic by George Powell, I think. The character is named George because H.G. Wells, George was his middle name. Next, Tinfoil Butterfly. I just read this, and this is the longest book on the list. It's 60,000 words, which is really short for a novel. But this is about Emma, who has recently had a hysterectomy, is a drug addict, and has just an awful tragic past. Gets stranded in the Black Hills and the Badlands, where she meets a little boy who, due to scars from abuse, wears a tinfoil mask like a butterfly. And it's how this friendship between Emma and Earl blooms, and how they try to escape the Badlands and Earl's abusive father, and how Emma uses this to sort of overcome her horrific past. And she just kind of goes through in her mind what it means to be 18 years old and completely infertile. So, highly recommend. I did actually read this as part of my 52 book challenge, and I found this book on Instagram, which was one of the prompts, and I found it on Books and Lala's Instagram. So thank you, Kayla, so much. You led me to a new favorite. I gave this 5 stars. Okay, next. Anthem. This is a dystopian story. I read it for Dystopian Week. One of the original dystopian stories. It's kind of an exploration of fascism and communism and individuality. Like the pronouns I doesn't even really exist. They all say we. When they're talking about themselves, they'll say we think this instead of I think this. And it's about a man who invents a light bulb. And that's the whole revolve around the story, and it's really interesting. It doesn't sound like it would be interesting, but it actually was. So I definitely recommend that. That one's less than 20,000 words. It's really great. Okay, now for my favorite. The Dead by James Joyce. Oh, favorite work of short fiction of all time. The Dead is really, it's not a novella, it's what's called a novelette because it's under 20,000 words. It's about 13,000, I think. You can read it in one sitting, you probably should. For me, it took about an hour to read, and I'm kind of a slow reader. But this is about a man and his wife, Gabriel and Greta, who Gabriel is a book reviewer. It takes place during like early Irish Republic troubles where the West Britons are getting in there and trying to take over Ireland. And he's a book reviewer for a British newspaper. And it really explores that. They're getting together on the Feast of Epiphany, which is like January 6th, I think. I don't know, I'm not a Christian anymore, so. But it's just, you get so deep inside Gabriel's head, and you talk about how it's just a big discussion on like the people who have passed on and what they mean to us. And oh my goodness, the last paragraph, I know it from memory. The full paragraph, not really, but the last line I can say. This is the last line in the story. I'm going to close my eyes just to prove to you that I am not reading anything. His soul swooned slowly as he heard the snow falling faintly and faintly falling across the universe, like the descent of their last end upon all the living and the dead. Yeah, I have that memorized, so that should tell you how much of an impact this book left on me. I love it. It's my favorite short work of fiction of all time, and it's one of my favorite just works of fiction of all time. It's incredible. So there you go. Those were my 10 favorite short books that I've read, and I'm loving short books. It's a whole new world, like I said. So thanks for tuning in. It feels good to be back. So keep reading, keep writing, keep loving words, and I will see you next time. Bye.